Hey everybody, and welcome back to that Kilted Guy videos here on YouTube. Do you guys have some of that ugly popcorn ceiling like this stuff, or some of these pictures here I'm going to show you, and maybe you want to get rid of it? Well, we're going to show you how to do that the professional way. It's going to be a little bit quicker, more thorough, and give you a better job, and we're going to show you how to do that right after this. Hey, welcome back, and thanks again for stopping by our channel here at That Kilted Guy Videos. We always appreciate all of our viewers and all your comments, and of course your subscriptions and your thumbs up if you like our video. Now, what we're going to talk about today is this stuff everybody refers to as popcorn ceiling. Some people call it cottage cheese texture. The more official name is aggregated texture, or we used to call it acoustical ceiling texture. I'm one of the ones that sprayed this stuff back in the 70s. I know, don't throw rocks at me. But we did spray a lot of this back then, my dad and I. He was a drywall contractor for many years. And they called it acoustical ceiling texture because it actually, the little balls in the popcorn ceiling, those are little foam, styrofoam balls. And when they sprayed this on brand new, you had the raw, kind of powdery drywall mud that was the base with these popcorn balls in it, styrofoam balls, and they actually had sound absorption properties to them, so it was an acoustical deadening treatment. Now, why else did we spray it back then? Well, I think the biggest reason was it was cheap. You see this in a lot of tract homes and that, and it's partly because we could do less work to get it ready for this, because this hides a multitude of sins, and we could spray it, and then the painters would come in and not even paint it because it went on white. It looked basically painted, and hey, you know, save the builder some money. So that was probably the two big reasons. And third, I'm sure it was kind of a fad back then. We even put glitter in it. Maybe you've seen some of that. We would put gold or silver glitter in it, and you'd have this nice sparkly ceiling, which was kind of cool at the time, but it's getting a little dated. Okay, in this house, most of the ceilings have actually not been painted, and you can tell a lot of times by the flat kind of appearance to it. A lot of times they're dirtier looking because over the years it absorbs a lot of junk out of the air. And the other way is get on a ladder, or if you're tall, you reach up and rub it like that. Well, this room's been painted, so it doesn't work, but if it hasn't been painted, it'll often just fall off because it's really not a very strong bond up there. Now, some of the reasons for getting rid of popcorn ceiling texture, there's actually quite a few. Let's start with the fact that it's dated. Two is it actually kind of hurts the resale value of your home. It may not lower the price much, but it does turn a lot of buyers away. There was a concern of asbestos in this stuff. Pre-1980, some of it had asbestos in it. So you might want to get it tested before you go messing with it. But as a contractor, I can't touch it if it's got asbestos, but in our state here in Colorado, the homeowner can. But I would advise against it because we all know what asbestos is linked to, like mesothelioma and that. It's not a very safe thing once you disturb it. If you leave it alone, the asbestos is fine. So if you got that, you want to get it tested, and then you got to decide, do you want to pay a remediation asbestos contractor to remove it, which could cost you a fortune. Could run $6,000 to $10,000 for a small house. Or do you want to do it yourself? Or third option, you could actually put another layer of sheetrock right over it, encapsulate it, and finish it like new, and then you've eliminated that. We do that sometimes. But if it has asbestos, we just don't scrape it, don't disturb it. The other things about it, it tends to be kind of like a sponge. It absorbs a lot of stuff out of the air, especially if it hasn't been painted much. It picks up a lot of the dust in the air. You'll often see what looks like spider webs on the ceiling, and especially around an air conditioner vent. You might see something like in this picture here, where it just turns black around there. And then your only option, you can't wash it, so your option is to paint it. Well, it's really hard to paint because if it hasn't been painted before, it tends to just get sucked right into your paint roller and you pull a lot of it off the ceiling and it's just kind of a mess. If you spray it, you'd probably have to mask off all the walls or spray all the walls too. And actually, I'll mention too that because of the jagged surface up where the popcorn meets the wall, it's kind of hard to cut in a wall because you're actually having to cut in around each of those little jaggedy bumps or just come close to it or something. And so it's a lot more work to paint. The way, some of the methods that you can do it, there's 2 or 3. We talked about encapsulating it with another layer of sheetrock, which is kind of expensive. You can dry scrape it, and that is if it lets you, because sometimes it just isn't really going to dry scrape. You're going to do more damage trying to dry scrape it. But if it doesn't want to scrape dry or wet, you may have to scrape dry first, knock off the peaks, and have somebody come in and skim coat a layer of drywall mud over the whole surface in order to get that to smooth out to where you can put a new finish on it. But I'd say about 80% of the time you can wet spray it and go ahead and get it removed that way. Now for tools, you don't really need a whole lot. Our main tool is our scraper, and what we use is just a paint extension pole, and we have mounted a 10-inch drywall mud knife on it. And I've just done this with these hose clamps, and this thing's been on here for years. It's never come loose. It holds really well. So it's a pretty effective method. The disadvantage for me is it kind of ties up this pole, but we've got several. And you can go a little bit smaller. You could use a 6-inch. I wouldn't go below a 6-inch. The smaller the knife is, the less it flexes. You can see these flex pretty easy. The smaller knives flex less and less, and because of that, you're going to gouge the surface more when you're scraping. The flexibility of this just allows it to kind of follow the contours a little bit more and scrape it without so much damage. So you can go bigger, but you get bigger and it's going to get harder and harder to push, and 10 seems to be a pretty magic number for us. So that's your main scraper. Okay, and the other thing you'll probably want to have is it's handy to have a 6-inch knife. This works great for getting up there and cleaning out the angles after you've scraped everything. Also, every now and then you need to clean your knife off, so works good for that. Now you need a method to spray the water. I've heard of people using just a spray bottle. I sure wouldn't want to try it. You might have to reload that spray bottle 20, 30, 40 times for one room. If you can get hold of a garden sprayer, your ordinary garden sprayer, this will sure speed things up. But for us, we do a lot of this. So I have made up my own kind of a homemade contraption here. And I'll show you a picture of it. This is basically an ag sprayer that you'd see like on a 15 or 20 gallon weed sprayer tank. Runs off 12 volt, puts out a lot more water. I can drop it in a 5-gallon bucket and spray continuously. And all I did was find a 12 volt adapter with enough amperage to run this. Then I plug it into the wall and run with, we put about 20 feet of hose on here so that we can move all over while we're spraying, and we don't have to stop, pump all the time, stop and pump and go fill it up again every 1.5 to 2 gallons. We can go a lot longer, get it done a lot faster. So you probably won't need to do that, but if you're trying to get into this business, there's you an option. Now for supplies, mostly what you need is the water with some kind of soap. I've tried about everything, and I'm not sure that there's anything that works better than the other, but my main go-to is this product called Crud Cutter, and I think it's spelled with a K. We'll see if we can pop a picture up here. Like in this one, we put about 3 gallons of water in here and about a cup of the Crud Cutter. But I think Dawn dish soap or something like that would work fine. The other supplies, of course, you're going to need masking. And we're going to talk about a couple of different ways to mask here. On this job, the homeowner is replacing all of the flooring, and They are repainting the entire house, getting rid of this cool peachy color here. Because of that, we didn't have to mask off as much as we normally would. So in this case, if you are going to repaint the walls, you could just cover the floors. And then what we did is we masked off all the baseboard because it's actually a stained wood baseboard, and we don't want to get this white, crappy, goopy stuff on it that's going to make a mess out of it, and we have to go back and wash it all. Plus, we're going to spray a primer on it when we're done, and the painter's going to take over from there. So that will make it easier for us to spray the primer. Then we had to mask off all of the curtains, and we just run a solid strip of tape across the plastic. This is a 9x400 visqueen, which is 0.31 mil thick. It's really, really thin, but works great for this because tape sticks to it really well. It's really light, so it doesn't want to pull your tape off the wall, and it's cheap. I think 9 foot wide by 400 costs somewhere around $25, which is a lot cheaper than the heavier stuff. We're standing on 6 mil because what we're doing is just moving this 6 mil around. As we scrape, we catch it, roll this up to the middle, get a scoop shovel that we have, and dump it into our trash. This 6 mil, in comparison, I think this is 10 by 100, and it costs something like $50. So now what we also did is we took a little piece of shim and ran some staples in up here, because after we spray this with water, the water tends to want to make the tape turn loose, and then this could just fall off and we could make a mess out of the curtains and lose all our work we did. So we just put a couple shims about every 6 or 8 feet, put a couple staples in them. They're really short staples. They pull out real easy. They make minimal damage, and it keeps the plastic up. You also should go through and remove things like ceiling fan blades, at least take the blades down and mask off all those, mask off lights and that. I'd recommend on lights that you loosen them. There's different ways they loosen up, but loosen it, drop it down about 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 so that you can scrape under it. Now, if you're going to not paint the walls, what you want to do is mask all of the walls, because if you scrape this and it comes down on the wall, it's going to make a mess, a white mess all over that you got to try and clean, and it's difficult. So we just mask everything with the same film. We just run it completely, one solid piece all the way around the room, starting at the door and ending at the door, overlapping so we can walk through it, but it covers everything. We hold it down about 6 inches, because if you try to get too tight to this, after you scrape it, you're going to have a little gap up there, so you got to count on that. Plus, a lot of it's going to come loose. It's not going to be the greatest masking for painting. So we hold it down about 6 inches. We do all the scraping. We come in the next day and remask, and now we can mask tighter to the ceiling. And then we mask with a strip of 9-inch paper, and then we tape that paper to the plastic, which then helps hold this plastic up, seals it all, makes it a nice tight unit here, so that now when we paint, no paint's going to get by. So that kind of pretty much covers the masking. Now we're going to move on to the actual process. Okay, now we're ready to tackle this thing. We got our weapon of choice, water sprayer, and all you really have to do is spray it multiple times. Usually it takes at least twice, even if it hasn't been painted. We did a little test on this one, and I think it's going to come off even though it's been painted. The more it's been painted and the glossier the paint, the harder it tends to be to come off or to get it off. So you just have to kind of experiment, and I would really recommend you find some out of the way place and do a little test scrape, say 1 square foot, because if you find it's really going to scrape hard, you don't want to get all that masking done and all that prep and then find out you can't even scrape it. Really, we're not going to talk too much here. Just going to start spraying some water, and I'll probably do a little sped up time lapse because you don't really need to watch this over and over. But the main secret is get it as wet as you can. If it starts dripping off the ceiling very much, you probably got it too wet. It'll often drip a little bit, but if it turns into a rainstorm in there, get your slicker out and leave the room. Evacuate immediately, call authorities. No, I'm just kidding. You put too much on. So you want to get it a good soaking, and then just let it sit and let it soak. And it'll usually take about 15 minutes of soaking between coats. Now if it hasn't been painted, you can generally soak just one right after the other because it absorbs it quickly. But with it painted like this, take your time, soak it multiple times, give it time to soak in, and you may have to put on up to 4 to 5, even 6 coats of water. I've had to wait 2 hours with soaking before it would start scraping, so that's why you want to do the test to find out what works for you. Little joke there. Hey, we're back and we have let this soak for about 15 minutes. We got 2 coats of water on it. I did a little test scrape over here and I think it's ready to go. And that's what you do in between. You let it soak a little while. When you're ready to spray the next one, get your scraper out, do a test scrape and see how it looks. Now, on these scrapers, most of these knives, often they have a slight curve to them, a set. This one is curved like this. And so I have mounted it so that when I hold it up there like that, the tips are down. They're less likely to dig into the sheetrock. You can often get away with running it like this, but if you start seeing the edges digging in, you're gouging, taking out little chunks more, all that, flip it over, try it this way. Okay, now there is actually some technique to how you do this. One reason we like the pole is it allows us to stand down here without having to be up here on a ladder or something. But if you don't have that, use what you've got. But the main thing is that you want to have this angled about like a 45. If you get it too much like this, you're going to dig in and it's going to do more damage. If you lay it down enough, you're not going to take off enough. You want to actually take off as much of this popcorn and the carrier mud as you can, and you'll see we'll get quite a bit of that off, and then we're going to take care of the rest of it with some sanding tomorrow once it dries. So start out with a little test spot here. You can sometimes just dig in, and if it hasn't been painted, it'll sometimes fall off in crumbles. If it's been painted, it'll come off in sheets like this. So let me actually get this out of the way. And another little tip here, it's going to get really messy. This is going to stick to your shoes, or if you're like me, I'm barefoot because I have neuropathy in my feet. I can't hardly wear shoes, but being barefoot, I can just scrape it off and then wipe my feet off on a rag or something. I'm good to go. Shoes are much harder to clean. I haven't found a great solution to that other than take them out and hose them off with a hose. The other thing is this plastic gets slick. It's wet. You can slip and fall, so be careful. And as always, you're handling sharp objects. You probably should wear safety gear. This isn't really dusty, so we don't wear that safety gear, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. Wear some safety gear if you need to. So you get it started like that, and then just apply fairly firm pressure and push. Now, when you get near the edge like that, there's a piece of corner tape that runs 1.25 inches down here and 1.25 inches over here. So be careful as you push into the angle, because you could just dig it right up and then you've got to do some repairs there. So just take it easy when you get over here. And then the other way, see, I actually caught the edge of it right there. You probably can't see that, but the other way is to go down the angle this way. So scrape. What I usually recommend is scrape up to it, stop about right there, and then turn and come down and get that last little bit. You'll do less damage to your joint tape, but this process is next to impossible to not do some damage. You might get lucky. Okay, that's basically your scraping procedure. Now you're gonna have a lot of little debris in here. You could do this today or tomorrow. Just go along and just kind of lightly cut along there, and that knocks some of it off. Then tomorrow we're gonna show you how to clean that up even more. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Okay, it's now day 2 and we've let this dry overnight. We ran some fans in here to help dry everything out. I think I mentioned before, but if not, I like to dry out the popcorn on the floor because it weighs a whole lot less. A bag in my big Brute trash can, if we just fill it like 2/3 to 3/4 full, it weighs about 80 pounds, so it gets pretty heavy, and that's with a dry version. So if it's wet, it really adds up fast. You can only fill it up maybe half full. Okay, now that it's dry, you can see how the ceiling looks here. It's not bad. But if you were to paint this just the way it is, which I've seen some people do, it looks pretty crappy. It really does not look good, so I highly advise against doing that. It needs some kind of texture, or if you're going to leave it smooth, it needs a lot more work, and one of the first things you can do is to sand it. Now, we've got our power sander back here, but first thing I would start is in your angles, because there's almost always little bits of debris in there, and my sander won't reach into the angles. A lot of sanders, even a pole sander, has a little bit of difficulty. So what I recommend, let's go ahead and move up high and I'll show you how we're going to tackle the ceiling from here. Okay, so what you want to do when you're up here in the angles is use your 6-inch knife. And again, these 6s have a fairly square corner. Mine's so worn out, it's actually rounded here, but it still has a fairly a good 90 right here, which makes it work well in these angles and that. So you just go along. Sometimes I do what I did yesterday, which is lightly cut that, scrape it a little more, just kind of clean it up. And then you can take one of these sponge sanders and using the 2 abrasive sides, just run it through here pretty quickly, about like that. Now you've got your angle cleaned up. You go around the whole room, do that, and then your angles are ready. Okay, the next step is you want to sand the whole ceiling, and I'm going to sand a little bit for you to show you how far we take it. You see the before picture again, and then I'm going to show you an after picture, but I'll let you see what we do with the sanding. Now, I will point out this is a very dusty, messy operation. I highly recommend safety goggles and a dust mask, but we are using a $1,200 Porter Cable drywall sander, which you can often rent for about $20 a day. It's well worth it. Here's a picture of it. I'll show you here on the screen. The only dust that's going to get away from us is with our sander here. And because this is a spinning sander, it does sometimes shoot dust out the side if you let it get a little bit loose against the ceiling, or when you pull it down. There's various times it will. So it's not totally dust free, but while it's sanding, it's generally trapping at least 85 to 90% of the dust. You can use a pole sander, or you could probably hand sand it, but we'll show you how we do it the professional way here. Okay, as you can see, very little dust got away from us there. I'm going to show you the after picture now. And this is what it looks like after we've sanded it. Basically looks almost like a new construction job again. We've got rid of most of that white chalky dust that you can see in the before picture, and compare that to the after picture, And that's what we're going for, because that white chalky dust, it isn't really stuck very good at this point. So if you apply anything over it, then whatever you apply, such as texture, is not really stuck that well, and that's partly why we get rid of it. Plus it smooths out the whole surface and brings it back to a like new condition again. Now at this stage, once you've got it all sanded, you have to look and decide what you've got to do for repairs. For example, here's some repairs that popped up. I'll show you a picture here. This is a crack and a little damage in the angles. And we also sometimes get bigger cracks, we get nail pops, we get all kinds of damage that appears after we've done this, and you've just got to go through and be able to fix that. So what I normally do, it depends on each job. It looks like this one might not need it. I normally go through and coat every joint again. And part of the reason is, when we did this stuff back in the 70s, we could get by with one less coat, and some guys did. So once we scrape this off, now it's one coat short for a good finish. So we go through and coat everything, including all the nails, which in this case, these are nails, not screws. Nails generally come in these two. You'll have two, and two. That indicates those are nails for sure. So we'll go through and coat all those again, touch up any bad areas, fix anything that needs fixed. You'll see some things like on this job, this came up. We find out that there was a previous repair, and we have to rework it a little bit, make it better. You'll find these kind of things when you uncover your ceiling with this popcorn ceiling. So go through and do all your repairs, get everything coated that you need, sand it again, depending on the texture you're going to do. If you're going to do a lighter orange peel finish, for example, you'll need to work it further, leave less edges, make it a better finish to start with before your texture. But if you're going to do something heavy like a skip trowel like we're going to do, you can get by with less finish work. Doesn't mean you can leave nasty stuff behind, but you can leave more edges and a few more minor defects because you can cover it with your texture. Now, I'm going to clarify, that means minor defects. You can't cover deep nail holes. I will even coat most of these nails just because they can show through, because once you texture it, your mud's going to shrink a little bit and it'll telegraph or photograph the defects right back through the mud. So you don't want that. If you're not real familiar with how to finish drywall, watch some of our other videos on repairing holes and such, and that'll give you a little better insight into what you've got to do here. So we're going to go ahead and get it back at it here. I'm going to sand the rest of this house, and we're going to start fixing any damage and such. And then after that, we're basically ready to texture it. So I hope this video helps you with your popcorn ceiling removal. If you got any questions, feel free to ask us in the comments. And as always, we thank you for stopping by and checking out our channel. And if you haven't done it yet, we would appreciate you subscribing at the end. That helps you and it helps us, because you'll get notified when we release new videos that may help you out with another project. And it helps us by getting us shown more on YouTube. There's also some links in the description below for information. We may have links to where you can buy some of the items we use in here and other information. And as always, if you like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you don't, give us a thumbs down and let me know why. I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by again. Until the next video, we'll see you then.